today's webinar, which is basically on Fireside Chat on Golden Visa, investing, living and working in Portugal. We are really thankful to our partners, Aretha Capital Partners Limited, Mr. Ashish Saraf, for international member of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We are really thankful to you, Ashish ji, for becoming our member. We also welcome Ms. Christina Hipsley, the General Manager, Portuguese Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time and joining us today for this webinar. And we also welcome Mr. Abhishek Goenka, the partner, ICA Advisors India. Thank you, Abhishek ji, for joining us today. And from PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we have Mr. Sanjay Agarwal, the President, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much, sir, for your time today. And we also have Mr. Saurabh Sanyal, the Secretary General of PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So I thank you all the attendees and participants from India and overseas for joining this webinar today. So I will not take much of your time. I would like to request Shri Sanjay Agarwal, the President, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to give his presidential address.
Thank you, Naveen-ji. Good afternoon and good morning to the participants here today, depending on where you are located, whether in India or in Europe or in other places. But definitely a pleasure for me to be a part of this webinar. I would especially like to welcome our speakers, Ms. Christina Hipsley from the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce in UK, Mr. Ashish Saraf, the founder of Aretha Capitals, and Mr. Abhishek Goenka, the partner of ICA Advisors. On behalf of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I would also like to welcome all the participants to this fireside chat on the Golden Visa, investing, living and working in Portugal. My heartfelt appreciation to Aretha Capital Partners for extending their support to this interactive session. We would also like to thank our supporting partners, Navi Technologies, Aretha Greece Vision Fund, Aretha Portugal Vision Fund, and the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce in United Kingdom, as also ICA Advisors. Due to the pandemic, the future seems to be quite promising on this field. At PhD Chamber, we are always trying to come up with innovative concepts to provide a meaningful dialogue for the stakeholders in our nation and in the business community. Portugal, of course, is Europe's westernmost country, situated in the Iberian Peninsula and bordering Spain in the European Union. I think the speech writers have made a mistake. How can Portugal be the westernmost country? It could be the southernmost country, but not the westernmost. I'm sorry. But it is an important country on the map. That much I would definitely say. Portugal has had a very rich history in any case, and we have this Portuguese enclave of Goa for such a long time in our country, and I believe the first Christians were into India, but if not the first, among the first Christians were probably Portuguese. Anyways, officially, the nation is known as República Portuguesa, and it is a member of Europe's Schengen area and uses the euro as its currency. As per the current scenario, the world witnessed an increase of 31,000 ultra-high net worth individuals in 2019, taking the number of such people with a net worth of $30 million or more to 513,000 as per the Knight Frank Wealth Report for 2020. This translates into a 6.4% jump over 2018. India ranks 12th and had 5,986 such individuals in 2019, which is likely to reach 10,354, very exact predictions, by 2024. The number of billionaires in India, on the other hand, is likely to reach 113 by 2024, up from 104 in 2019. Among the asset classes, Indian ultra-high net worth individuals are the most aggressive in equity investment, with 72% willing to invest in this asset class compared to a global average of just 29%. Asia is quickly closing the gap on Europe, and it is predicted that by 2024, it will be the world's second largest hub, with forecast 5-year growth of 44%. Of the 20 fastest growing countries, 6 are located in Asia, led by India with 73% of the growth, 5 in Europe, led by Sweden with 47% growth, and 3 in Africa, led by Egypt with 66% growth. Wealth creation in 2020 will be an uphill task, as ultra-high net worth individuals expect political and economic challenges, including global economic slowdown, trade wars, and political tension to weigh on their ability. For many wealthy Indian citizens, investment in real estate to obtain a golden visa is often an attractive option. A clear benefit for many Indian passport holders is the ease of travel that a residency card or a second passport brings. In the last few years, international travel has become increasingly difficult and time consuming, especially when frequent and multiple visa applications are mandatory. Business visas for Indian citizens become easier to obtain on many second passports. Be it for business travel or for leisure, a second citizenship and accompanied passport can significantly ease travel and visa applications for Indian citizens. At the end, I would like to request and recommend to all the investors to practice due diligence before making any decision regarding taking up any residency or a citizenship program. We all know that all the gloss is not always true. So we have to apply our minds properly and, of course, be very, very careful when we take a decision which has got a large impact on our financial commitments. With this, I would like to leave it to the experts from the industry to take things further in explaining the benefits of the Portugal investment program. Thank you all, and I wish you all a very fruitful and meaningful deliberations. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President sir, for your address and setting the agenda for today's webinar. So now I would like to introduce Ms. Christina Hitsley. She is the General Manager of Portuguese Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom. So Christina has been the General Manager of the Portuguese Chamber of Commerce UK since 2009. She started her career in the advertising and media relations, working first in London, then Lisbon, where she spent 10 years running publishing and advertising business. Having built a successful book and contract magazine publishing business in Portugal with offices in Lisbon and Algarve, she then sold the business and returned to London, where she has been working ever since. Christina speaks Portuguese and has a wide range of contacts. So thank you. I will take this first. I would request if you can tell us about Portugal in general and which are some of the largest foreign communities here, focusing on British and Indian communities.
Thank you indeed. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to tell you all more about the pleasures and business
Christina,
opportunities
can you hear me?
of living and working in Portugal. Yes, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can, Christina.
Yes, Christina, we can hear you.
I'll carry on then. So to give you a flavour of Portugal, I know Portugal very well. I've lived there many years, although I'm now living back in the UK. And Portugal is a small country. It's 10 million people. It is the westernmost part of Europe in the sense that there's a point in Portugal which is the most western part of Europe. So it's extremely west. It's the last part of Europe to see the sun go down.
Sorry for interrupting, but thank you, ma'am. I'm really grateful that you you were able to put me in a better position. I was a bit embarrassed when I thought I'd given a wrong.
No, your speechwriter is quite correct. And so interestingly, Portugal and England are on the same Greenwich timeline. So we are on exactly the same longitude, and the rest of Europe is 1 hour ahead. So Spain is 1 hour ahead of Portugal, even though they share the same landmass. So Portugal, as I know to my experience, is a wonderful place to live and work. There are 10 million Portuguese living in Portugal, but there are approximately 600,000 foreigners officially resident in Portugal, according to the most recent research from Portugal's Borders and Frontiers. And the Portuguese nation has a long tradition of travel and exploration, as our chairman said just now in his introduction. So there is a long tradition in the Portuguese economy of looking outwards and attracting foreign investment and traveling, always overseas. And as a result, many other communities have traditionally come into Portugal as well for trading and other reasons. So Portugal has a long history as a trading economy with business all over the world, as we know, in Goa, in Macau, in Brazil, in South Africa, and also a long trading relationship with the United Kingdom. Now, that means that the Portuguese community and the Portuguese country has a long tradition of people arriving and leaving, and Portuguese living abroad, and foreigners coming to live in Portugal. Now, for colonial reasons or for historical reasons, the biggest number of foreign residents in Portugal are the Brazilians, who have long historical links with Portugal, as you can imagine. The second biggest group of foreign residents in Portugal is the British, and the most recent figures show that there are around 46,000 British officially resident in Portugal right now, but there are many thousands more British people who have second houses in Portugal, who live there for many months of the year. Now, after the Brazilians and the British, several other European nationalities are strong in Portugal. They have big communities living in Portugal, among them the Italians and the French. But very interestingly, the figures show that there are officially 24,550 Indian residents officially resident in Portugal. But later I will tell you that in reality, there are more like 90,000 Indians living in Portugal right now. We can talk more about that later. Now, the reason why there is such a large foreign community in Portugal, plus it is so attractive for foreign residents to come and live in Portugal, is that English is incredibly common. Most Portuguese people speak English. They grow up speaking English. There is a strong tradition of English in the schools in Portugal, and there is a very, very big tradition of tourism in Portugal. So, although there are only 10 million inhabitants in Portugal, they receive around 20 million tourists a year, of which a big proportion is Spanish visitors who simply come and go very easily. But over 2 million British people visit Portugal on holiday every year, and many other European nationalities as well. So there is a big perception in Europe of Portugal as a very attractive place to holiday, to live, and to reside. And there are several good reasons, I think. Those are some of the reasons, but those are the main reasons why Portugal is so attractive and has such large foreign communities.
Great, Christina. Christina, there is another question that, as per the current situation, we would like to ask you, which is what is the healthcare system like? And how is the education spectrum, including high schools and universities in Portugal, to be specific?
Okay, so the health situation in Portugal, they have handled the pandemic very well, actually, but that most of Europe is relatively equal in that sense. The situation in Portugal is they have a very strong national health service, as in there's a state medical system. As you would expect, you have a doctor, you enter the medical system if you have a problem, and it is free at the point of entry. But many foreigners who invest in Portugal or live in Portugal also take out private medical insurance. There is a very strong tradition in Portugal as well of the private medical hospitals. There are 3 very important chains of private hospitals in Portugal spread throughout the country, and the ability to access those private medical facilities is easy. You pay a monthly subscription, which can means you have immediate access to those hospitals. Depending how much you wish to pay, you can also take out private medical insurance, which covers you in an even greater way. And one of the reasons why the private medical system is so well developed in Portugal is because there are so many foreigners living there, and they have created the demand, and the private hospitals have answered that need. But the public health system in Portugal is very adequate as well. You would not find it lacking in any way.
Interesting, interesting. There is a very interesting question which came across from most of our delegates also. So they are asking, what are the main business sectors in Portugal, to be precise, and what are the business opportunities, and how does trading with the rest of the European Union works?
Indeed, I will come to that question. I did forget to answer your other important point. Forgive me. I'll just
the education, yes, education one.
Education system, and that will lead into the business. So the education system, there is obviously a Portuguese public health, a public school system. The Portuguese nationals go to school. It's extremely, it's free at the point of entry. Languages form a big part of that. So many, all young students in Portugal will have, if they're Portuguese, will be also learning English all the way through as well. There is also a very large amount, over 30, if I'm not mistaken, international schools in Portugal. It is a very high amount. There are 12 international schools in the Algarve alone, and another 10 or 15 in the Lisbon area, because again, the demand from international residents is such that there is a French lycée, there is a German school, there is the American international school. There are 3 or 4 very well regarded international schools in the Lisbon area. There is also 2 classic British schools run on, if you like, boarding school principles in the Lisbon area, again, due to long British tradition in Portugal. All those private schools in Portugal either do the IB, the International Baccalaureate, or they will do the British system of O-levels and A-levels, or they will do whatever is appropriate to the nationality. If you're in the German school or the American school, you will do the equivalent. So again, international education in Portugal is already extremely well catered for. The universities, there are 3 very famous universities in Lisbon. There's another famous university in Coimbra, just north of Lisbon. They have excellent business schools. Actually, 2 Portuguese business schools are rated in the Financial Times top 50, which is a fantastic achievement. Those business schools and much of the university education, depending on your subject, is taught in English. And the universities in Portugal have a strong tradition of research and development in technology, ironically. Most people don't know this, but there is a very high tradition of research and development in the Portuguese universities, which is now being commercialized for intellectual property. So education-wise, the opportunities, particularly the private education sector, are extremely high. Now, we were talking, you also asked me about the business sectors in Portugal. Now, the main business sectors in Portugal, again, may surprise you. Many foreigners think that Portugal is all about tourism and wine and cork. Yes, but they're not the biggest businesses. The largest business sectors in Portugal, funnily enough, the biggest sectors for investment, for foreign direct investment into Portugal, is the automotive industry in Portugal. There are 5 big car manufacturers in Portugal: Volkswagen Auto Europa, Mitsubishi, and Salvador Caetano, which is a huge company which makes buses. There's also a very big sector in Portugal, which is financial services, information and communication technology, particularly financial services, software and hardware and telecoms. Ironically, Portugal has some world-leading IT systems, particularly the Via Verde, which is the pay per toll system on the motorways in Portugal. That was a Europe-leading system. Not even the British have it. And so the Portuguese have been exporting that system around Europe. Portuguese are also extremely strong in the industrial sector of plastic molding. But it's highly technical, highly specialized, and its overseas customers account for 80% of its total sales. That's because the plastic molding sector in Portugal largely supplies the automotive industry and the car industry. So a lot of the parts are exported, ironically, to the UK for assembly into the aircraft wings and the cars. Portugal's also a big wine producer in Europe. It's the 5th biggest wine producer. And renewable energies is another big area for Portugal because of solar, because of wind, and because of its marine research as well. They have a lot of world-beating research going on at the moment into the oceans and how the oceans can contribute to anti-pollution drives. Portugal has a big shared services sector as well, by which I mean offshore or nearshore outsourcing. So Portugal runs a lot of call centers. It runs a lot of back office outsourcing, invoicing, payroll, all sorts of things for large companies all over Europe. It's also a big cork producer, the world's biggest cork producer, and it also has an aeronautical sector and a biotechnology sector, plus textiles, very dynamic, a lot of highly sophisticated, well-organized textile factories in the north of Portugal, which supply huge suppliers like Zara. They make all the trousers for Zara. They also supply very big retailers in the UK like Marks and Spencer's, but they also supply high fashion brands as well. So there is a big textile sector here in Portugal as well. So I think you can see that, ironically, Portugal is a small country that is a hidden gem, which is why so many people are now becoming more and more interested in Portugal for tax reasons, for business reasons, for lifestyle reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Christina, just before we move further, I have one more question. Do you have any idea in terms of the percentage of students who from India who are studying in Portugal currently, specifically in the universities, if you have a percentage idea specific?
I don't actually. I could find out for you. If you'd like me to tell you a little bit more about the Indian community in Portugal, would this be a good time to do it, or would you prefer me to do it later?
Yeah, I think we can do it later once we have the Q&A from the audience directly as well.
Of course,
So
that's right. So I can certainly get you the figures for the Indian students in Portugal. Given the amount of official residents in Portugal, Indian residents in Portugal, I'm sure it'll be not an insignificant number, but for sure we can get that information for you.
absolutely, absolutely. And moving further, there was the last question that we have is where do most of the foreigners national lives in Portugal? I mean, are they concentrated in localities like Lisbon, Oporto, or Algarve, like we have in Harrow in suburbs of London, where South Asians are mostly concentrated?
Well, yes. The Indian community lives in some of these areas too, but if we're talking about the British, the French, the Germans, etc., yes. The foreign residents in Portugal tend to live in the Algarve for reasons to do with it's a wonderful, very restful place to live. There is a very, very large international community in the Lisbon area, yes. So central Lisbon and also along what's called the Linha, which is the area. Lisbon is a very beautiful city that's on a very large river, which leads to the sea. So, because it was always a very big seaport. So the capital city of Lisbon sits on the banks of the river. It's a very wide river estuary. But then where the river estuary leads down to the sea, there are many, many very beautiful suburbs, if you like, which face the sea, which are well served by public transport. And many foreigners and Portuguese live there. And they also live where the Lisbon River meets the sea, which is called Cascais. And so, yes, the greater Lisbon area has a large proportion of British, all sorts, Indians, Germans, French, Brazilians, every nationality you can imagine. The Porto in the north is more, there are quite a lot of foreigners for sure, but no, the concentrations are in the greater Lisbon area and the Algarve.
Fantastic.
Yes, there are 3 main airports in Portugal, which so there are 2 million people living in the greater Lisbon area, the large conurbation, and there are 1 million people living, if you like, in the heart of the city. Just to give you obviously compared to Delhi, that's tiny.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, Christina, for the in-depth view, and we will definitely get back to you with the questions which the audience have. So moving on further, I'm going to talk about Mr. Ashish Saraf. And no doubt, he's one person who likes to do multitasking. He is the founder and CEO of Aretha Capital Partners Limited. He's investment manager at Aretha Portugal Vision Fund, managing member at Aretha Greece Vision Fund, founder and CEO of Nuvi Technologies. So moving on further, Ashish is an investment professional for over 20 years and come with an extensive background in securities, investment banking, real estate finance, energy finance, equities, and commodity markets. He is an MBA alumnus of London Business School. At Aretha Capital Partners, he works on setting up of institution-grade investment funds for retail, NW, and RCBI investors. His primary activities include identifying investment opportunities that align with global due diligence and risk management standard. At Nuvi Technologies, his vision is to develop a global integrated real estate solution platform which connects all missing dots in the fragmented industry. He has previously served in a corporate role as Managing Director South Asia and Middle East at AVG America Investment LLC and Director of India at LCR Capital Partners LLC. So moving on further, Mr. Ashish, I would initially to start with, I'll direct you with one of the questions, which is basically to tell more about Portugal Visa and your firm's role in with specifically with the investors who are looking for any kind of investment related to the Golden Visa in Portugal.
Well, thanks a lot for that wonderful introduction, Mayank, and a very good morning to all of you from sunny Cambridge. To address the Portugal Visa, let me share a quick slide which talks about the basics of the program. And of course, I'll walk through how the investments work so that the audience is able to get a feedback. Let me know if you can see my screen, please.
Yes, it is visible.
Brilliant. So the Portugal Golden Visa, or which is known as the ARI permit in the country, has been around for about 8 years now and raised over 6 billion euros in capital. There are 2 essential routes, either investment in an investment fund or buying a property. And the minimum investment threshold is 350,000 euros. There are some taxes associated if you're buying a property and some legal and immigration expenses when you're applying for your Golden Visa. Increasingly, a large part of this has historically been property purchases, but investors who are more passive are increasingly looking at investment fund options these days. The minimum age for applicants needs to be 21. What you must have is a health insurance for all applicants before you enter the country and a clear background check. Now, the SEF is fairly, I would say, fairly critical in terms of seeing who the applicant is and whether they should be given a residence permit. And one of the easiest way to look at it is if you've had EU visas rejected in the past, then we potentially need to do a further background check for you. One of the key benefits, or rather the attraction points of the Portugal Golden Visa, unlike similar ones offered by the United States or United Kingdom, is that the age of children is far higher who can be included, and parents are welcome. So with one investment, the investor, spouse, minor children, even major children up to 25 years who are still dependent on their parents, as well as parents of both the investor and the spouse, are welcome to apply for residence permits, because Europe has a concept of family reunification, and the European Charter believes that a family that stays together is happy together. Now, if you look at similar programs in the US like EB5, or in the United Kingdom like Tier 1, and if you were 40 years old who's going for an investment visa, you would never be able to get your parents or your wife's parents to be a part of that application. So that becomes a key attraction for a lot of investors these days. The annual stay requirements are very, very minimal. You need to stay for 7 days in the first year and 14 days in the subsequent year periods, which means on an average, you need to spend about a week or 10 days in the country. So you can still maintain your residence permits while having just one quick holiday a year, even if you're running your business in India or China or Middle East. And it provides a path to citizenship just after 5 years of legal residence. So if you're someone who's applying today, you would expect your residence permits in about 6 to 9 months. And then 5 years from then, you are eligible to apply for citizenship as well. And that is where the large chunk of benefits begin for an investor. As a European citizen, you're free to travel, study, work, and live anywhere in Europe. So you're not restricted to Portugal. You get access to a 20 trillion euro market comprising of 26 different countries. And it might always be the case that your daughter wants to live in Switzerland, your son wants to go to France to pursue engineering, and you might want to retire in Cyprus. So it gives you a wide variety of choices. You have the right to be treated as the same way as anyone else. And historically, we've seen over the last 10 years that there have been many instances when Europe has always come out at the highest when it comes to equality of rights. We've seen the Black Lives movements, we've seen so many movements in the US, but in most cases, you would see that Europe, the quality of life and diversity is potentially the highest. One thing which I like about the European Charter is the ability to also use consular services of any European country when you're on the move. So if you were stuck in, let's say, South America during COVID-19, and there was no Portuguese chamber or Portuguese embassy where you were, but there was a French one, you could call upon the French one to help you out as a European citizen. So these are some of the reasons why it is very attractive, and it's very rewarding at the end of the day.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Moving on further, as an investor specifically, what could be the key consideration while deciding which investment option to go with?
In my view, and based on the hundreds of clients I have spoken to in the past few years, I have found that passive investors tend to choose the investment fund options, whereas someone who's looking to move in over the next 12 to 18 months is likely to go for a real estate purchase. Having said that, the usual entry point of an investment fund always makes sense, because when you are moving to a new country, you potentially don't know where you want to live on day one. Now, imagine you're in Delhi. I could show you 100 projects on Novi, and you could potentially select one of them. But as of today, you don't know if you want to live in Lisbon or you want to live in Algarve, or even if you know you want to live in Lisbon that every investor has on mind. Traditionally, real estate purchase has been high, but as we see, investors are now taking the more passive route, getting into the investment funds as a preferred option of investment. And once they are closer to moving in the country, they would like to experience and then decide where they want to live. And those decisions could be around location, where the schools are going to be, where the universities are going to be, so on and so forth. So it sort of gives you the flexibility of having your golden visa and not yet committing to a property which might be totally useless 3 years down the line. So these are some of the considerations. Of course, every situation is unique, and we are happy to discuss individually and potentially provide a solution.
I think you can add one more consideration to it, saying that a country which is free from COVID cases specifically. That's on the priority now.
Well,
So
that's a moving
moving
number, Mayank, and one should not be very excited or celebrate a win too early these days. But yes, the
absolutely,
health situation
absolutely,
is far better in some parts of the world than others, especially those which are a little less populated. So it's a blessing in
absolutely,
disguise.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, great. So moving on further, what does the impending legal change mean for potential investors?
Well, that's a great question. I think a lot of investors are looking at this, and the laws change on at the strike of midnight, 31st December this year. So effective 1st January to 2022, if you're making an application, you would fall under the new laws. But if you can squeeze in your application before 31st December, then you are in the current regime. Now, the current regime provides you two options. One is the investment fund option, where your exposure is 350,000 euros. That's just about 3 crores in Indian rupees. And if you're buying a real estate, then the investment threshold is about 500,000. Come 2022, the investment fund threshold is raised from 350 to 500,000 euros. So that means an additional commitment of almost 50% of capital for about 6 years. So this side of the fence, 350, that side of the fence, 500,000. And when it comes to real estate, unfortunately, from next year onwards, buying real estate in the metropolitan city of Lisbon or Porto would not qualify for golden visa because prices have gone up. They've heated up over the past 5 years due to foreign buyers, and the government wants to restrict real estate direct investments in the inland parts of the country. Whereas as a fund manager, I could still go and buy a block of apartments in Lisbon if the investors are investing in my fund. So indirectly, you could still invest in Lisbon. Directly, you cannot invest in Lisbon next year.
Okay, okay, that's interesting. That's something which was unanswered as of now. I think that's pretty clear from the discussion we had. Okay, moving on further, there is a very common question in most of our Indian investors saying that there are multiple options available in the market when it comes to take the EU citizenship. So there are less expensive, or I would say less cost-effective measures of taking residency and citizenship of developing countries, which is comparatively lower in cost. And there are, of course, countries which are having higher cost in terms of taking the residency and citizenship, but gives you the access to the EU. So specifically, when we talk about Portugal, what will be the benefits that an Indian investors are getting specifically after taking the residency and citizenship in Portugal itself?
Not taking sides here, Mayank. Look, we operate in the business, and of course, if a client is more interested in the eastern part of Europe or the western part of Europe, we've got fund options in Greece and Portugal, or even Cyprus for that matter. But I would like to point out that the net cost in Portugal is actually much lower than anywhere else. And we're talking about the net cost because the cost basically means how much are you putting up as an investment, how much is your administrative cost, but also what your investment is going to be able to deliver. Portugal as a market is a very high IRR delivering market. So while you might be able to invest, let's say, 200,000 euros and go into another country, how much will that 200,000 euros deliver you in terms of return on investment? Because if that money is going to go down the drain, then your net cost is going to be much higher. Now, if you look at the last 10 years, Portuguese real estate or most of the industries have double-digit IRRs. So if you're putting up 350,000 euros today, you're probably looking at having over 500,000 euros as your exit value in 6 years from now. So that is, and if you've paid 50,000 euros in immigration and government fees over the next 5 years, your net cost is not negative, it is still positive.
Okay.
However, one of the key benefits, I would say, is the path to citizenship. And almost every other country would require you to live there for at least half the time, 183 days. And therefore, Portuguese program becomes very attractive for people who want a passport in the near future, but are not able to relocate right away. Now, this is something which we face with clients from all over Asia and Middle East, especially when it comes to Greece, because Greece is the second most popular. But then Greece requires you to spend 183 days every year for you to be eligible for the passport. So
Absolutely.
that sort of becomes a key differentiator. And then for most Asian families, if you're looking from an education standpoint, if you want to send your kids to universities, English-speaking universities in Europe, which includes Ireland, by the way, then the local fees is 10% of what an international student pays. So holistically, the
Absolutely.
net cost is probably the lowest in Portugal.
Yeah, and I think, moreover, people should not consider the value of residency or citizenship. They should consider the value of the deliverables which are coming along in that particular country to go with. So it could be health facilities, it could be education, it could be your social security. There are multiple factors which basically combine and basically push you for a particular residency or citizenship program. So
But
moving
those
on
are
further specifically,
intangible benefits. I mean, I'll just spend a couple of minutes here. Those are certainly
yeah, yeah,
intangible benefits. But since we're talking about investment immigration, I think the key here is investment. And therefore, it's important to find out how your investment is going to perform over the next 5 years. And therefore, you want to be in a country which is stable politically, financially, and has a track record of delivering positive returns over the past decades. And Portugal has centuries of history of delivering positive financial returns on investment.
okay, when we say positive financial returns, what could be the financial yield for it in that case for investors specifically?
Well, if you're buying a property, the rental yields are around 3 to 4% in most parts of Portugal. But if you're going for the investment fund, most sectors deliver, I would say, double-digit returns. And even in our investment funds, when we look at opportunities to invest in, we look at projects which can deliver an annualized IRR of 8 to 12%, half of which could come from rentals, the other half which could come from appreciation when we flip projects every 2 to 3 years. So I'm fairly confident that we can deliver anywhere between 8 and 12% IRR to investors. Of course, capital is at risk, but then the underlying asset is real estate. And as long as the quality of that real estate is at the top levels, if it's an A grade project that you are underwriting, then you're pretty well off.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would like to tell the audience that the safest way to go for investments in Portugal is through Aretha Capital. So just cross your fingers and go straight away. No second thoughts to it. Great. Thank you so much, Ashish ji. We'll definitely come back to you with the questions from the audience. In the meantime, we'll move forward with Mr. Abhishek Goenka. So, Mr. Abhishek Goenka is partner at AK Advisors India. Abhishek is the founder and partner at AK Advisors, a boutique tax and regulatory advisory firm. Abhishek has close to 3 decades of experience in the advisory field, having been in Anderson, EY, BMR, advisors, and PwC. While in PwC, he was the India leader for corporate and international tax. Abhishek has the unique credential of having held an operating role as a CEO of the RMZ family office and at CoWorks. Abhishek has been actively engaged in advising families in setting up a governance framework and on succession planning. He has also assisted promoters of some of the largest listed companies in moving to the trust holding structure, including dealing with the cross-border issues. Abhishek is well versed with the various operating models of single and multi-family offices. Abhishek is also known for his domain expertise in real estate and PropTech. He's a graduate in commerce from the University of Bangalore and qualified as a rank holding chartered accountant in 1996. So moving on further, We welcome you, Mr. Abhishek Goenka, to this webinar. And before we start, we have few questions that we have actually gathered from our relevant sources and the delegates to go with. So the first one would be, could you please give an overview on how the Indian system of taxation works for non-resident individuals? And when do potential immigrants become non-residents from Indian tax residency point of view?
Sure. Thank you, Mayank, for the kind introduction. And, I just wanted to say that I also have personal experience being a co-applicant in one of the immigration visa programs, which again, Ashish had helped a few years back in. But to specifically talk about the question you asked, the Indian tax regime, as far as residency is concerned, operates quite similar to how the regimes operate in most parts of the world. So it's based on the physical presence in India, right? And of course, like with most Indian rules and regulations, there are several complexities and nuances. So I'm just going to give you a sort of simplified version and then address any specific questions. Basically, what one needs to remember is that are you spending 182 days or more in India or not, right? That is essentially the first test that one needs to look at. And essentially, if you're an Indian who is leaving India, then again, as long as you've spent less than 182 days, 180 days or less, for that year, you will not be regarded as an Indian tax resident. And therefore, any income that you earn outside of India will not be liable to tax in India. Again, to just simplify it, the India follows a sort of combination of source and territorial based taxation. So once you are an Indian tax resident, then you are taxed on your global income, irrespective of where it is earned from. On the other hand, the moment you become a non-resident, you are not taxed on any income that you earn outside India, but to the extent you continue to have income that you have earned in India, that will still be taxable. So just by becoming a non-resident, you cannot avoid paying taxes in India for sources of income that arise in India. That said, assuming you have moved to Portugal in this example, Portugal again has typically a 183-day rule. And once you become a resident there and start paying taxes in Portugal, you will be able to take advantage of the tax treaty between Portugal and India and get a credit in one of the two countries, which again depends on a set of rules, which I can explain time permitting. So just to summarize, 182 days test is the main thing. You will remain liable to Indian tax on Indian sourced income even after you become a non-resident. But in general, you should be able to avoid double taxation through taking shelter of the India-Portugal tax treaty.
Great. I think that's something which has really opened our eyes, because this confusion was there since the beginning. Because in most of the programs that we have done so far, everybody has this question about the dual taxation specifically. I think this seems to be pretty clear. And moving on further, can you please explain the nuanced difference between the tax and the foreign exchange laws when it comes to the residential status for individuals specifically?
Sure. So like I said, under the tax laws, it is based on the physical presence and the threshold is 182 days, again, subject to some sub rules that apply in certain circumstances. However, when it comes to the foreign exchange laws, which is commonly known as FEMA in India, it is partly based on number of days and partly based on intention, right? And therefore, anyone who is leaving India with an intention either to take up employment outside India or with an intention to stay outside India for an uncertain period of time, then automatically that person becomes a non-resident under the foreign exchange laws, irrespective of the number of days he or she is present in India. So just to give you a sort of exaggerated example, even if somebody spends 200 days in India in a particular financial year, that person obviously would have crossed the 182-day threshold and be a resident for tax purposes. But if that person leaves India for employment in Portugal or to live in Portugal under this program, which means that he or she is leaving for an uncertain period of time or maybe even permanently, then notwithstanding that they retain their citizenship and other things, for foreign exchange purposes, they will become a non-resident. So one is intention based and the other is number of days based.
Okay, okay. And could you also please explain the recent changes on the rules of residency for tax purpose and their impact?
Sure. So what has changed is really in the context of non-residents. So assuming, as I explained before, somebody becomes a non-resident and is living outside India, the question then arises is that what is the threshold of the number of days somebody can visit India every year? Because obviously people have family and other connections back in India. So how many days can you stay in India without triggering a change in status where you once again become a resident? Earlier, the rule was again that the same 182 days applied, but the recent changes have reduced that threshold to 120 days as long as you have income in India of more than 15 lakh rupees. So again, I'm simplifying it and leaving out some detail, but the 182-day window to visit India has been reduced to 120 days in cases where you have income in India of more than 15 lakh rupees. Now, again, there are some opportunities to structure this where, depending on the nature of the income, you can move those income sources to a partnership firm, etc., so that you come below the 15 lakh limit and you can still take advantage of the longer window of 182 days.
Okay.
It's also important to point out that another change that was made was that an Indian citizen, if he or she is not paying tax anywhere in the world, then irrespective of how many days you spend in India, you will be deemed to be a resident in India. Now that again should not apply in the context of what we're discussing, because Portuguese is not a tax haven, and typically if you are living in Portugal, you would have some tax liability. But it's just important to plan that if you're looking to move around the globe and as a result you don't end up becoming a tax resident in any country, then by default, again, if your income in India is more than 15 lakhs, you will be deemed to be an Indian resident.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, great. And what would be the key aspects to be borne in minds by an individual who seeks and apply for golden visa specifically? So, I mean, what one should start thinking and plan for in terms of when he's actually thinking of taking golden visa?
So I think, again, just in interest of time, I'll make two quick points. One, that of course the foreign exchange rules to make the investment. Now, particularly in the context of what Ashish explained, where it's an investment in a fund, those investments are permitted under the liberalized remittance scheme, which is open to individuals. Each individual in every Indian financial year has an entitlement of 250,000 US dollars. Those entitlements can be clubbed in the context of a family. And therefore, that is one thing that you should start planning when you're looking to invest in the fund, as to making sure that you have those entitlement limits available and open, and you plan any other commitments that you may have in your children's education and other foreign exchange commitments. From a tax side, at the time of making the investment per se, there's no immediate planning to be done. Of course, you'll have to disclose this as a foreign asset in your tax returns. But ultimately, once the visa is granted, it all depends again on the desire of the individual to live outside India or not. And basis that, one needs to plan for what kind of residential status they may attain. And like I said, if they have sources of income in India, they might want to plan to move some of those into firms and other legal entities so that they get a higher window of visiting India in any year and not changing their residential status.
Okay, okay, great. So last one would be that there is a lot of focus on creating a trust in India. And what do you think? How does the golden visa impact such planning?
So I don't think there's a direct correlation. I would make two quick points here. Firstly, trust structures in India should be carefully thought through. One should rush into them purely based on the fear of estate tax coming in. There are many other compelling reasons to do a trust in terms of succession and governance issues, and those should be ahead of the tax reasons. But assuming you move assets to a trust, one just needs to understand who the beneficiaries of that income will be, the income that arises from those assets. And again, it will be linked to the residential status, what I've already explained before. So again, I would only, at the cost of summarizing it, say that there's no impact. Whatever one would have wanted to do in a trust route, one should go ahead with that, irrespective of the Portuguese visa process. And of course, once that is granted and somebody takes a decision on where to live on a more permanent basis, the implications can be evaluated.
Fantastic, fantastic. Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Goenka, for such an interesting session on. And moving on further, there are a few questions from the audience, which we are going to take one by one. And I will address it to the quorum, and I would request specific to your area if you can answer these. One is there a fast track option available for citizenship in Portugal? So, yes.
I'm afraid not, Mayank. There is no fast track option. One of the key reasons why the European Commission has been so hardballed on Cyprus and on Malta is because this is one of the reasons that, if you're going to be a citizen of Europe, we want to see you for 5 years before we grant you a citizenship. And the Cyprus program, which required a 2 million euro investment and would give you a citizenship in 6 months, that came under fire, which was then paused temporarily. It's now being reworked, and with new guidance, it will come back probably next year sometime. The Malta's similar program is under fire, so the answer is no. But then it's good because in this 5-year period, it's sort of a guaranteed path to citizenship. And 5 years, time flies by.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, great. The second one is, does it have a government-approved investment and available financing options from the bank as well?
Yes, I have to take that as well. Well, firstly, the financing option. The key requirement for a golden visa is that it must be your capital. So you can't get it financed inside European Union. Of course, if you can take a loan in India and fund it, that's perfectly fine. We do have financing option on all our projects on Novi, but then you can't apply for golden visa if you're using a loan from, say, Santander or HSBC or any of the European banks, because then it's not your capital.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great.
And
So
in
another
terms of
question is,
government approval,
yeah.
so yes, the funds are authorized by the Portuguese Securities Market Commission, and therefore they are indirectly approved. While capital is at risk, one needs to look at the structure of the fund before making a decision. And real estate funds tend to be usually safe because the underlying value is real estate holdings.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there is I'll take this question as to be the last one, considering there are many more, and I will just forward the same to you. It is, how do I buy an existing business in Portugal? Also, can I get a PR status post that? If yes, is there a minimum period to stay included in it as well?
I think this is an immigration question, and I'm not an expert in immigration, but I know this because I have a subsidiary in Portugal. The route to getting a residency in any European country via buying businesses, etc., is far more complicated, and that is why the golden visa route is probably so popular, because it doesn't come with any strings attached. Yes, you could buy a business in Portugal, depends upon how big the business has been. But in terms of the residence permit per se, that's not really an investor category residence permit. Your business could sponsor you as an employee or as a shareholder, but that does not give you the path to citizenship, and or maybe just not have the limited stay requirement. You would then fall under the normal immigration process, by which you'll probably end up investing a couple of million euros, buying a business, and then permanently living there before you can get your status.
Okay, interesting. Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Ashish. I think that was quite insightful when it comes to specifically taking golden visa through Portugal. And I think all the questions were well answered, and there are many more which we're going to forward it to you. These are more specific questions when it comes to taking residency and citizenship as well. So I think you will have a clear understanding as to what is the best suited situation for them in terms of their own capacity also. So moving on, I would like to invite our, yeah, great. Moving on, I would like to invite our Secretary General, Mr. Saurabh Sanyal, to give a vote of thanks. Sir, over to you, sir.
Before that, Mayank, I would like to pose some questions.
Yes, please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It was an excellent interaction and a lot of information which Christina has shared for the Portugal region, as well as Ashish ji and Abhishek ji. I wanted to know, because there is a region in the European Union, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. They have a system of providing e-residency. So is there some system like this which is existing in Portugal? Because then it becomes very easy for the startups of Indian origin to move to Portugal and be on the e-residency visa and do their business operating from India. It's a very specific question that I'm asking. Any idea?
Can probably give you a couple of points on this. So there is something called a digital nomad visa, which was recently launched by a lot of countries in the European Union. Of course, Latvia, Lithuania, etc. They're trying to attract more of the tech talent and the crypto people who are being asked to leave from countries like China because of the regulations. So it's quite attractive to them. But from a jurisdictional standpoint, Portugal or other developed countries on the Western coast are far more, I would say, conscious before coming out with very liberal immigration systems because because of their own stable health systems, education systems, etc. They don't want to overload it with very loosely built immigration systems. So your question is an immigration one, and I can have one of our immigration solicitors address this for you. But you would usually not see what you see on the eastern side, you would not find on the western side, as a rule of thumb, simply
Right.
because of the structural differences of the two sides of the continent.
Okay. Okay. Got it. So thank you so much. Thank you on behalf of the PhD chamber and the leadership, and on my own, I would like to place on record extreme gratitude to Mr. Ashish Saraf, Mr. Abhishek Goenka, and Christina for having spared your valuable time and come and discuss all these things. And we saw that there was a huge lineup in the auditorium. A lot of people were interested. In fact, piece of Portugal still exists in India, and which is one of the most lucrative destinations as far as tourism is concerned, which is Goa. And it became even more popular during pandemic because we did not have any traces of the virus or very little traces of the virus in Goa, and so it became a haven for the tourists and for all those who wanted to move out of Delhi and remain in a safer and a beautiful climate. So they all moved to Goa. Many of my friends shifted to Goa. Many of them sold their businesses, sold their properties in Delhi and moved permanently to Goa. So you find beautiful architecture. Goa, the Goan architecture and the Portugal architecture have very much similarity because it was once upon a time one of the colonies there. And the food part also is very interesting there. The seafood, especially, which is very akin to Portugal, because Portugal is also got the Arabian Sea on two sides, the southern side and the western side, and so is Goa. So Goa has the Indian Ocean. So very similar food habits, very similar. Music is another very important part of Portugal as well as Goa in India.
Find the same names as well. You'll
Yeah,
find the
yeah,
same names, Sanchez, Almeida's.
absolutely,
So
absolutely,
I always say that if you love Goa, you will love Portugal because I love both the
absolutely,
places.
absolutely. You are right. In fact, I had the opportunity of being in another country in Africa where we have Portuguese culture, which is practiced there. It is the southern part of Goa, where I had executed some projects while I was in the corporate. So it is an excellent, meeting of minds and meeting of culture and meeting of habits. So first of all, allow me to express my heartfelt appreciation to Aretha Capital Partners Limited for extending their support in organizing this interactive session. Thank you so much, Ashish Sarafji. It is a very much talked about subject in the current market scenario. We would also like to thank our supporting partners, the Nevi Technologies Limited, Aretha Greece Vision Fund, Aretha Portugal Vision Fund, Portuguese Chamber of Commerce in the United Kingdom, and ICA Advisors India, which I believe have answered questions for which most of us had regarding the investing, living, and working in Portugal. So I, on behalf of the PhD Chamber, I once again thank you, each one of you, for having spared your time and come on this platform and have discussed. We look forward to many more such interactive sessions, and we would love to have you on physically on board. I mean, virtual is okay, but whatever discussions, physical interaction takes place, we still believe in that old technology of physically meeting each other and then exchanging uh, our ideas, our thoughts, our processes, and nothing to beat that individual face-to-face, meeting, which is of course turns, and again it translates into good business, good tourism, good friendship. So with these words, I once again thank you and look forward to many more opportunities in the future. I must compliment my team led by Mr. Naveen Seth and Mayank, who have put this together. And I, from my core of heart, I wish to thank Mr. Ashish Saraf for becoming a member. We look forward to many more members from your region, from the UK, because traditionally India and UK have been very, very long association, and we had tremendous opportunities. Our members, we have more than 2,500 direct members and more than 150,000 direct and indirect members. We have gone through our website. So many of them are doing business with UK and the European Union. So with these words, thank you so much and Jai Hind.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. And just to put on record, sir, I just got a call from Mr. Naveen Seth, and he was asking for your apologies because there was some network issue, he couldn't join in. But at the same time, with the kind of interest that we have seen in past 1 week when we were promoting this particular webinar, it was advised that we should also have similar session on the 5th of August when we are starting with the GRACE, Global Residency and Citizenship Expo.
Yeah.
So we could have a separate session again for Portugal in that particular event too.
Certainly.
And I would request all, and I would request all of you to be part of it. It will be a great affair because already there are so many other questions lined up, and we can get those answered during that particular event itself.
I'm sure
We
we'll
would
be happy
also
to.
like to extend an MOU with the Portugal Chamber of Commerce.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
so that will be another good thing which we can share. It will be a 1-pager or a 2-pager MOU where we can have exchange of ideas, exchange of visits, and we can be your partner in India for for hosting any delegations. And when we move on a delegation, when the time is right, we can come to Portugal with with serious people who really want to invest in Portugal. So there again, the Chamber of Commerce can help us, assist us in in carrying out our delegate activities there.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so
Audience
much.
for being so patient and listening to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.